onto Pennsylvania Avenue, which is the pedestrian area in front of the White House, which is then in front of the main north lawn fence, is not acceptable. I'll get up here in front a second just to give you an idea sort of numbers and crowds. We've got probably 200 protesters out here, give or take. And then we've got now, Shannon, well up to about 100 Secret Service officers in riot gear. In my time in Washington, I've never even seen anything like this. The Secret Service, as you know, Shannon, from covering the White House, takes great pride in enforcing things discreetly. And this is anything now but discreet. They have gotten to the point where they are ready now for pretty much anything. They have these both weapons and this gear, obviously, nearby, and they have called out reinforcements today. We've got the Secret Service trucks with the trailers. We've got some of their arrest wagons over there. They've brought out an awful lot of hardware here to the north lawn of the White House and then to Lafayette Park in a way that really I've never seen anything like this. And sort of the beginning of chants and the amount of violence and anger out here directed at the Secret Service is something I've seen in riots in other cities and directed at police in other cities. I've never seen here. We're going to take you back up. Christian's going to go back, look back up here, and we've seen this. The protesters push out. They throw firecrackers. They throw water. They throw bricks at the Secret Service. You have a scuffle, and then things push out. And now this could get interesting because the Secret Service's barricades that they've broken down, you can see them that are handcuffed together. They're now going to use these to try and push back against Secret Service unless perhaps some cooler heads prevailed, which looks like they might have just done. We've got a couple of protesters now telling the protesters to back off, which we've seen sometimes, and this is a welcome sight in a situation like this, that is as combustible as this is. And you can see the protester leaders now doing their hands up, don't shoot chant, which means if you have your hands up, you can't throw firecrackers, you can't throw bricks, and you can't charge anybody with these metal barricades. Just to give you an idea of where we're at in terms of distance and proximity to the White House, I'm going to get Christian just to pan up here. We are literally 100 or 200 yards from the front door of the White House. This is where we walk in every morning to go to the White House briefing room or go up and do live shots in front of the White House. What you see, that big wall of white, is where they're doing the construction on the new White House fence. But if Christian pans a little bit farther to the right, you see that that's where the White House north lawn begins, and this is where the protesters are. After that scrum that we had earlier, we now sort of have this standoff between the police and Secret Service in their riot shields and the protesters with their hands up. There's only, I don't know, a couple of hundred of the most diehard who are out here. This is what they had broken through. This is where, right, if you look down here, this is where the fence line had been. They broke that off. The Secret Service had put it together with their handcuffs, with wire ties and padlocks. So the force of the protesters through the night broke all this down. And this is what the protesters were trying to force through and then use as a weapon against the Secret Service and their officers in their shields. We saw the protesters push them back. And take another look here. People's hands are down, but the yelling and the shouting, Shannon, continues. It's hard to know how this ends because the protesters don't appear to be backing off, and the Secret Service is certainly not going to let anybody go any farther. And we've seen them. This was the line they have now drawn, Shannon. We've talked to some folks, and they're angry, and they've seen the videotape of what happened in Minneapolis. You may have just heard a message they had, a very personal message for the president, which we've heard out here as well. I'm trying to watch and see where the Secret Service is moving, but it's the same messages we've heard. Black Lives Matter. and then it sort of escalates from there into far more violent and difficult messages after that. But in terms of a specific demand, it's more of an anger and a want to be heard about how they view the police as racist, and they think that Minneapolis and what's happened there is simply further evidence of that, and the fact that the other officers haven't been arrested isn't enough. And if you try to sort of reason with people and talk about the DOJ investigation and how the president has promised things will be expedited in that doesn't really get you very far in these conversations, Shannon.
Officer just got hurt.
Shannon, I'm going to interrupt you real quick. I'm going to interrupt you real quick. It appears as though at least a couple of Secret Service officers, one of them just got hurt. You can see him walking back there, clutching his head. And we don't know whether that was bricks or firecrackers or what happened. We weren't able to see what happened. He's not one of the ones wearing the riot shields, but as this gets later into the evening, we can imagine that the tolerance for officers getting hurt out here and where this crosses from a peaceful yet vocal protest, which is what it was earlier, and perhaps unruly, to actually violent. If it hasn't been crossed, it's about to be crossed right now, and you can see this running. We've still got a couple of Secret Service riot police here, but now they've fanned out, and it's pretty incredible how much of this bicycle barricade that, as we showed you, is reinforced with handcuffs, padlocks, bicycle locks have been broken down, Shannon. Watch him right there. Right behind you is a bicycle barricade.
Gotcha.
All right, stand by. They're coming back to us.
I didn't see how far it was going.
No, I appreciate it.
That's all I
always grab me. We got another injured officer. Are you a protester?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, me with my daughter. So she's
what do you
17 and had to come down.
What do you think about all this?
No comment. In my position.
All right, I got you. No worries, mate. They're about to rush.
They're all running.
What?
They're running.
Everybody's running. Something's happening.
Tear gas. Tear gas.
Tear gas. Tear gas at the White House. Tear gas. Guys, tear gas at the White House. Tear gas at the White House. Guys, tear gas at the White House. Tear gas at the White House.
It might be pepper spray, not tear gas. Hey, check. You got him. Is Doug packing up? Make sure he's packed up because they start to. Yeah, he's packed up. Okay.
Guys, are you listening to me?
Pepper spray. I don't think it's tear gas.
Tear gas or pepper spray at the White House. Flash urgent.
Essere ferito, l'attenzione è altissima, siamo proprio davanti alla residenza di Donald Trump.
Get me back on camera. All right, they're going to Tobin. I don't know why.
Okay.
This guy behind us wishes we'd get off the
Say again? I think they're keeping us up in a split screen.
I bet. I figured.
All right, let me know when you're ready for us.
All right, I'm gonna go back around over here.
All right, hold on.
Yeah. I feel drops. What's up with you?
Say again?
Say I feel raindrops.
We can only hope. Hold on. Look at them bring out more barricades. We're coming up. All right. We talk here, there, White House, and then down to the barricade. Show what.
That's all they
Yeah.
More people are trying on this
Well, things have certainly increased in terms of the confrontation between the Secret Service officers who are now in full riot gear and the protesters. We've had some type of chemical irritant is what law enforcement would call it, either pepper spray or tear gas, as things got exceptionally tense to try and push back these protesters who have broken down much of the bicycle barricade. And when we talk about that, I'm going to show you what we're talking about. This is what the Secret Service has as their first line of defense in front of the White House. They look like bicycle racks. They're quite a bit heavier duty than that. And actually, the Secret Service holds them together in times like this with handcuffs and bike lock wire and padlocks. The Secret Service broke through the protesters broke through that Secret Service line of defense. They've brought out now their riot gear, and they're making a stand here. They are not allowing people past this line onto Pennsylvania Avenue. To give you an idea of just how close that is to the White House, there is the White House North Lawn fence. Part of it's under construction, you can see, and then right up to the front door of the White House. The Secret Service has had a couple of people injured here. There have been some bricks thrown. There were a number of firecrackers set off towards the Secret Service, tons of water bottles thrown, and now they have brought out a lot more of these bicycle barricades, conceivably to rebuild this barricade, which could be under a little bit of a difficult circumstance here if they're going to try to push these protesters back. Whether or not they're going to try to push everybody back with that pepper spray or tear gas again and then rebuild the bicycle barricade, I don't know. It started to rain, which might be the merciful thing here to begin to quell some of the tempers here. But Shannon, as the night has worn on, the tempers have increased, the vitriol has increased, and the violence against these Secret Service officers and agents has increased. And as we talked about, so often the Secret Service takes great pride in the discretion with which they do their job, and the show of force right now that we are seeing in front of the White House is anything but discreet and anything like what I have ever seen. There was one time that in one of the Secret Service guardhouses I saw some of the riot shields, and now they're starting to push everybody back. So this might be the beginning of trying to rebuild this bicycle barricade, and they've got a couple of people pinned here. Now, whether or not they're going to try to arrest them or not, I don't know. But this is the scrum, and this is where things get very difficult inside of one of these riot scrums. And you can hear some of the very salty language that has been thrown at the Secret Service. They're letting the protesters come back out from inside the scrum. So they haven't arrested anybody yet, despite the number of arrests, the number of injuries to the Secret Service officers. And I'm trying to see, just from smelling the air, if that pepper spray or tear gas is coming back. And that might be the way that they would try to push this crowd back without having to actually go hands-on in the way they just did. But now might be the time that they try to rebuild this barricade with those handcuffs and also the wire. The one thing that was interesting, Shannon, you asked about, is there anything that people want? Is there some message that they want? And there's not a centralized message. We hear a lot of Black Lives Matter, no justice, no peace, and then some extraordinarily angry and salty language put towards the president. I talked to one gentleman out here who didn't want to go on camera. He said, I'm only here because my 17-year-old daughter's here, and I'm here to try and protect her. I asked to talk to him a little bit more. He said, I can't, but I'm just having a hard time with her out here. So you can tell there's a real fear of the level of violence that's going to come out here. And if you talk to people, Shannon, and try to reason with them about, hey, why are you angry with the president? It's the DOJ that's investigating this and put out the memo that you talked about earlier today. That's not much consolation to them as this standoff now with the Secret Service continues. But the Secret Service patience, which at 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 o'clock seem to be endless, appears to be wearing quite thin after their barricades were broken down, and at least a couple of their officers have been taken away with what appeared to be non-life-threatening but potentially serious injuries from either these firecrackers or bricks that have been flying over. Now we've got the rain coming down, and from my time in protest and your time out in the field, Shannon, you know that rain occasionally sends the crowd home, but also sometimes it leaves the most ardent protesters or demonstrators, whatever adjective you want to use to describe these folks out here.
It's nice to see you still out here.
Yeah, we can show you those. We can show you those. The Secret Service had brought out one of their big supply trucks. That's where all the riot gear came from. And then down Pennsylvania Avenue, they staged a couple of their big, one of those, they look like 15-passenger vans, but they've been cleared out to create sort of a mini jail in the back. And the Secret Service has brought those in. In terms of the protests that I have covered in different cities and in different places, I have never seen a police force that was confronted in this way repeatedly with bricks and other kinds of things show this kind of restraint. The Secret Service is very clear. They do not want to make arrests out here. They really don't want it to get to that point, but they also are not going to let anybody come across this line. And we saw when they did, first came the pepper spray, the tear gas, and then those scrums with the riot shields pushing back.
Like my father's grandfathers didn't go to war for fascism and shit. Like, y'all don't get paid enough to do this shit. Sorry.
Yeah. We definitely saw the Secret Service medics come out and look at a number of officers, including the one that was taken off. It appeared he had some kind of a head injury, and then they were taken over. They've got sort of a little mini command post there, and then farther down the fence line, they've got a couple of other staging areas. We didn't see an ambulance come out or a stretcher. The officer, thankfully, was able to walk away under their own power, but in these protests, things can get awfully violent awfully quickly, and with the bricks that have been thrown, and then also, obviously, we've had those firecrackers go off. People can get pretty hurt. Somebody takes one of those to the head, things can go badly. Again, it goes back to sort of how the Secret Service is wanting to handle this. They could have come from all sorts of direction to arrest these folks and to push them out, etc., and that just hasn't happened tonight. It's a credit to the Secret Service, and you'd hope that the violence here will stop. The standoff, though, certainly has not. Rain hasn't stopped it, tear gas hasn't stopped it, and the pushback of the riot shields hasn't stopped it as well. It'd be difficult to try to talk to any of these officers and wouldn't want to distract them and try to get any more of an update in terms of what's happened. There's another water bottle that just came from all the way in the back. It's clear that whoever the more angry agitators who are out here are pretty well organized, and they've got a plan. They came with both waters, bricks to throw, and they also have firecrackers. And then there's also been a number of nonviolent protesters. There's been a lot of people saying that they don't want to be violent. They're standing, they're chanting, they have signs. There's a lot of kids who are out here, and then you also obviously have the people who are very clearly willing to resort to violence, and then they're also very clearly to break down these bicycle barricades, and then you have somebody else who's saying that by reporting on the protesters, we're putting them in danger, which for all the riots I've covered, that's a new one at 12:20 outside of the White House. Shannon?
12.
Well, in Baltimore, much like what you're having in Minneapolis over the past couple of nights, there is no law. The police have pulled back, and looting and rioting and anarchy runs wild. It's something that was more akin to what I used to see in the Middle East, in Libya, or perhaps some nights in Egypt, maybe, and certainly not what you'd expect to see in America. I never thought I'd see something like that in America. This is a very different situation. I mean, this is clearly a protest with the Secret Service, who now was in plain clothes and now has come out with riot shields because people are breaking down bicycle barricades. So it's a much more contained and controlled situation. Probably the biggest difference between what you'd see in Baltimore or in Minneapolis or in any of these other towns. The police are going to make a stand here. Before, there's been calculated decisions. We reported on it in Baltimore. It's clearly happened in Minneapolis and other places that the police made a calculated decision to allow the rioters to burn off steam, burn down buildings, let them loot, etc. That's happened. That's not going to happen here. The protesters are not going to go past here over to the White House north fence. That's not going to happen. The Secret Service is going to make that very clear. And so long as the protesters don't try, the Secret Service will let them do pretty much whatever they want here in Lafayette Park, where we've had these confrontations, and pretty sizable ones, is when the protesters have started to push in there, and that's when we saw the Secret Service come out with the riot gear, etc. And it's unclear, as the rain's now coming down even harder, whether or not the Secret Service is going to begin to start rounding up the people who are bringing in the firecrackers, etc., or whether they're going to just hold this line, Shannon, right here. They certainly have got, though, all the security lights on. We've seen a number of the observation posts and sniper posts up on the top of the White House with folks moving around, etc. So they are taking no chances here. This is a line that has been drawn. Keep the shot up.
I gotta think about covering his camera at some point.
What?
I gotta think about covering his camera at some point.
What do you need?
Anything?
What do we got? Anybody have a T-shirt or anything?
No, I've got a raincoat in my backpack.
All right, you want me to go back and get your backpack?
Is that his backpack here?
Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
I want to see what this guy's saying. He had like 3 different stories.
Thank you.
You want me to hold something? Here, I'll hold the camera.
To see what with the fourth one. The sequel shirt.
Good?
Yeah, for now. It's not good, but it's better than nothing.
I got a text from Madeline. It's like, are you wearing a white shirt with him? You never
Facts.
I never called him.
Just looking at that.
Yeah, stand by.
Who are you guys with? You mind me asking?
We got a freelance crew.
I know your crew's freelance. Who are you with?
Fox News Channel.
Fox News. You think that's fucking funny? So proud you got a logo out there. Love it. Viral report with the logo in it. Yeah, look at this.
Nobody in DC puts the logo, man.
I know.
Imagine selling your fucking soul for a paycheck.
Dude, dump them out for God.
No, I wish I had. I'd do a lot for I do a lot for a dark T-shirt, man.
I'm not kidding. I would actually do it too if you like it. I'm not. But
I appreciate it.
I also get you guys do a tough shot, but like, it's all interesting at the end of the day.
Where are you from? Stay behind. Can you see anything? Is this better? Better view?
It's all the same. It's just a little more vocal down here.
All right.
No peace! 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 No peace!
Did you drive?
I did.
Do you mind?
No, of course not.
All jobs matter, bitch! Are you ready to pop up? You ready to pop up for what? You don't have the truth? Why are you killing us? Why are you hating us? Why are you calling us?
Black lives matter! 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 Black lives matter!
You are a coward! You are a fucking fighter behind your back! You are an insecure bitch!
Watch my back. I gotta. Hey guys, things are about to. Hey, watch this shot. Okay.
You see how close they are. Basically, it's raining. They're face to face.
Just panning up to the White House.
They're face to face with these guys. Shields are up. Occasionally, something gets thrown in here. Credit to the cops. They've actually shown a lot of restraint. Rain's starting to come down pretty hard too.
Having fun yet?
Best night ever.
Oh, dude, this is like tame.
One guy came right up behind me and threw balls.
Did he?
Yeah.
Burn that shit down! Yeah! Burn that shit down! To the ground!
They're about to do something.
Freaking clouds up there, man. How's it raining?
Humidity.
Shoot it up! I'm getting that top out!